hello, lovely friends. Thank you so much for joining me for this very, very special video on a very, very special day, the Venus Cazimi Day. And we're going to be talking about the mythology of Venus and the role of Venus in the sky, because it's such a special day when Venus is in conjunction with the sun. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm here with a very special person. I can't wait to introduce you to her. She is so wise in the mythologies and the knowledge of male, female, masculine, feminine energies and how they're playing out on Earth at the moment and how we can work with those energies. And I can't wait to introduce you to Chriselda, otherwise known as the Neo-Luciferian Gnostic priestess Lumen Sophia. I hope I got that right. But Chriselda, it's wonderful to have you join me here on my channel. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you, Kesenya. You're awesome.
We're going to have a great time together for the next hour or so talking about Venus and all the potential incarnations of Venus and so on. Now, Chriselda, as I said, works with the masculine, feminine energy and all the issues around that, particularly pertaining to how the patriarchy has influenced the feminine and how we can work to overcome the oppression in that regard. And so how would you sum up your mission, Chriselda, in a nutshell?
I would say in a nutshell, I'm here to help women remember original truth. And I am by no means saying that I am and living inside of 100% original truth. And I hate when people are like, you know, I'm evolved and blah, blah, blah.
And you're not, so listen to me. Yeah.
Right. I'm just as human and as brutally human on this planet as anybody else, right? So I have learned everything the hard way and I continue to make mistakes, right? So this is where I'm coming from. But what I have realized so far in my path and the walk that I chose to walk is how much we are all living inside of amnesia. You know, there's a forgetfulness. From the minute we're born, we're born with this awe, about reality and the earth, and the most simple things are incredible to us. And then all of a sudden, it's just beat out of us with with shame and that you have to give up who you are in order to survive, which is unfortunately true, right? You have to start to learn how to pretend. Yeah. So the root of all of that, what I'm saying is in colonialism, but I'm not talking necessarily about the overtaking of the land, which that's a consequence of it. I'm talking about the primordial thought form of colonialism, which is rooted in the church, in church philosophy and church doctrine, which is what I think ruined and profaned everything. The irony is that the church is what profaned all things in my view, from my walk of life. And so I'm here to contribute to the collective that is participating, right? And helping us all remember original truth, pre-colonialism, pre-church. What is that?
Yep.
You know, what does that mean?
It's my belief, actually, because as you're aware, but not all my viewers might be aware, I do have a very religious background and I have a degree from Bible college, et cetera, et cetera. But it's my belief with the awakening that I've gone through that the church is actually the Antichrist spoken of in the book of Revelation. So, I totally agree with where you're coming from. We'll probably get deeply into that as we go along. But one thing I love about how you do your work is the joy that you bring to it. And just looking at you there with your Larry and Lawrence, the devils beside you, as we were talking about this before we began recording, they're Mexican traditional dolls, and they're I love them. And your beautiful earrings with their feminine symbol there. Like, I love it. I love the joy and the fun and the light that you bring to this really quite heavy and serious topic. So it's something I have great admiration for you about. Now, before we get into the serious discussion about these topics, perhaps I might just quickly explore why we're talking about this today when Venus is Cazimi with the sun and what that means, because we are an astrology channel and we want to know why this is pertinent. So I'm going to just flick to a different view and then I'll share Hopefully this is working. Yeah, I'm going to share with you my screen. So sit tight, Chriselda, while I do a bit of astro stuff. But I've got my astro wheel here. As you can see, we've got Venus and the Sun together. Now, Venus represents feminine things, as we know. Like Venus is beauty, it's love, it's forgiveness, it's kindness, it's cultural practices, it's art, it's the young woman archetype as well. She's known as like goddess Venus, but also goddess Aphrodite in ancient cultures, Rome and Greece. So when Venus moves to a point as she is today, in exact conjunction to the degree with the sun in the sky, what's happening is the issues of the feminine are coming before the king. The sun is the king. The solar system revolves around the sun. And so feminine energies are coming up for discussion with the king. And it's time to present maybe our feminine concerns, our issues with beauty, with love, with recognition as women, any issues pertaining to Venusian things get heard before the king. So that's why I wanted to talk about feminine issues today. So Venus is actually now on this day, she is switching from having been the morning star to the evening star. And I want to show you how that works. So for the last, well, quite a long while now, quite a few months, Venus, when she's been rising, so this is my horizon line. I just want to make sure this is coming up correctly on the screen. Yeah, so when we're rising, so this is the horizon, the eastern horizon, and the sun's about to rise, as you can see, as the planets move around. So just before the sun rises, Venus pops up first, and therefore she's a morning star. And then up comes the sun, and Venus gets swallowed up in the glare of the sun. So you can see how that works, how she is the morning star. Now when Venus is cazimi, conjunct, well, obviously she's invisible in the glare of the sun. We're not going to see her at all, but she is in consultation with the sun. And then after cazimi point, she begins to move beyond the sun in this direction. And so what happens? She is no longer the morning star, because as the planets rise, up comes the sun first, and Venus, when she rises, is completely lost in the glare of the sun. But what happens when it's evening and the sun is setting? Down goes the sun below the horizon first, and what's left in the sky? Venus. She becomes the evening star. So this is the transition point. I hope that's clear for everybody. This is the transition point between when Venus is cazimi, she's moving from being the morning star in this case to the evening star. Sometimes it works in reverse when she's in a retrograde motion, but that's not at this point this year. So let's have a look at just briefly the mythology around the transition from Venus from morning star to evening star. Now in Latin, Venus is actually known as Lucifer. So this is so pertinent that we're talking to Chriselda today, the neo-Luciferian priestess. I'm so pleased that you joined us. Really, I can't begin to tell you how excited I am about doing this video. Lucifer is known as the light bringer. I mean, he was associated with the mythology of Prometheus, the god who stole the light of knowledge for mankind, to bless mankind. That's also Lucifer. Prometheus is Lucifer as well. And he is the morning star energy of Venus. So we're moving from the Luciferian energy of the morning star of knowledge into the evening star, which is a different mythology. But the biblical references that we have to Lucifer acknowledge this. There's so much in the Bible that's actually astrological, although a lot of Christian cultures do not recognize this and shut their eyes. No, no, see no evil, hear no evil, kind of like they don't want to know about it. But it's so apparent, you'd be blind Freddy not to see how much astrological knowledge is in the Bible. So he is referred to in the Bible as the bright morning star. Interestingly enough, Jesus was also referred to as the bright morning star as well in the Bible. Think about that. We'll probably talk about that as we go along, I think. Now, in the Bible, there's also references to Lucifer's fall from heaven in Isaiah 14:12, which describes it's part of a description of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, the seat, the cradle of astrology. King Nebuchadnezzar's fall into madness, which was a historically documented account where he went out and sort of was like a wild bull in the fields, eating grass and doing all this sorts of stuff. And so Nebuchadnezzar descended into madness. At the time that Lucifer changed, like the morning star changed to the evening star. So this was this was correlated to and referred to in the Bible, not about Lucifer falling from God's grace. It was about Nebuchadnezzar descending into madness at the time of Venus transitioning. So that's just one of the references to Lucifer in the Bible and how it's completely misunderstood these days. So Venus, when she is in the Luciferian stage, the morning star phase, it's also known as Venus or phosphorus. That's another sort of mythological title that we give it. And when she is the evening star, she's known as Hesperus. So she's moving into the Hesperus stage today. Now, just a little bit more about Lucifer. Lucifer was the son of Aurora, the goddess of the dawn. And he was known as the herald of the dawn, again, the light bringer. So we're seeing all these ties to the light giver that Lucifer actually is. And as I said, check out the myth of Prometheus. It'll tell you more. But also in the ancient Sumerian culture, the story of Enki, which I might talk about a little later, it might come up in discussion. But Enki was also the representation of Lucifer, the bringer of knowledge to human beings, where his arch nemesis Enlil wanted to keep humans as slaves. So an interesting mythology that Lucifer is present in there. So this time that we're in now is representative of Lucifer's fall from grace. We're in that stage where Lucifer, the morning star, disappears and we go into evening star phase. And if you think about the biblical mythology, you know, that has been talked about, Lucifer falling from grace and being cast out from heaven and not part of God's kingdom and all that sort of thing, what is overlooked is that Lucifer comes back into grace, because eventually we will move from the Hesperus stage, the evening star phase, to the morning star phase again. And so the message of Lucifer is one of forgiveness and of coming back and being re-embraced and visible in the sky as the morning star. And that is so beautiful and profound because Venus rules forgiveness. Venus is the planet that rules, you know, the grace of forgiveness. And so this is the story, you know, this sort of falling from grace, this coming back into favor again, being loved and returning to the heavens once more. So no coincidences there. And the story, I actually personally find the story of Lucifer, like, it's my favorite mythology. Prometheus, Enki, I love them all. I just am captivated by it. So I was just so thrilled, as I've said, to have a Chriselda. I was going to call you your big title again, but I thought better of it. So thrilled to have Chriselda here to talk more about her work and her understanding of Lucifer and this beautiful energy, and to share your story with us, actually, Chriselda, because it's so aligned with these themes. So would you like to tell us a little more about what it is to be a Gnostic priestess?
Sure. I just have chills because, you know, I know some things about astrology, but I certainly am not an astrologer. So to hear your wisdom and your knowledge applied to this archetypal story of Lucifer is really profound. And it just reiterates this universal knowledge is really truth, right? It is original truth. It is true all the time. And that's what makes it so profound, because of, you know, everybody has their truths. And so the Gnostic priestess or Gnostic bishop or whomever, basically imagine, well, we have to talk about the beginning of Gnosticism, which was a long, long time ago. You know, it was like 200 BCE to 400 CE, you know, after the Common Era, beginning of the Common Era. But truly what makes the story profound is that Gnostics are really kind of the real Christians, the original Christians. And they understood the message of Jesus. I call it Jesus on the B-sides, you know, the B-sides Jesus. And so like the Gnostic Bible and Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas, all these other Gospels that are not and were not canonized, right? Well, they were not canonized for a reason, because what was canonized really focuses on Jesus man, right? And sort of, but the Gnostic Gospels really focus on the mystical aspects of Jesus. It's said that the Gnostic Gospels, those were the words of Jesus that he shared with his disciples in private. It's like the mystical side of Jesus, you know? So there's this public side and there's this deeper, personal, intimate expression of his philosophy and his mysticism. And so, of course, these Gnostic Gospels were going to be rebuked. You know, they didn't want to be included because they also represent what? The feminine. They represent the hidden wisdom that he only shared with his disciples, right? And so what's interesting is that the canonized version focuses on Jesus himself, because the church wants people to look to Jesus as the savior for them, right? Instead of saving themselves. And so here the Gnostics say, well, no, your path towards salvation is through yourself and your direct experience. And so they reinterpret Jesus's message of like that the kingdom of God is within you. It really is. You are your own salvation. And that is what the Luciferian light really is when you enter the inner chaos of yourself, right? We question and return to conscious awareness of, why am I making decisions that I'm making in my life? What has influenced me? Have I ever even thought about that? You know, do I ever question my assumptions? And so as a Gnostic priestess, all I'm saying, and I've made a promise, right, in my soul, that I will live as authentically as I possibly can. And when I enter another realm of remembrance of myself, I will then act on that remembrance. You know, I'm not going to just let it remain in my mind, but I'm going to create action and be an example of what that looks like in the world, right? But that's the hidden wisdom that's gaslighted and demonized, isn't it? In the church as it is today. And so that's a little bit about Gnosticism. And as a Gnostic priestess, you know, it's a promise I've made to myself, and as a result to everyone, right, that I come in contact with, that I have to include in my work and so on.
Yeah. Yep. I love it. So now that, no doubt, you can sort of share with us more depth in the mythology of Lucifer and his story for us. You know, I, for one, find it no coincidence that he has been completely vilified during this era of the patriarchy. You might like to talk about the patriarchal era and what that is as well, because of his associations with the only feminine planet, Venus, you know, and his connection with Venus and on that Venusian imagery. You know, that he's the one that's been condemned as sort of, you know, evil and horrible during patriarchy. Just to point out, Luna, the moon, is also a feminine goddess in the sky, but of the planets themselves, Venus is it when it comes to the feminine energy. Unfortunately, we've only got one. So yeah,
right. It's so wild.
So your take on the Lucifer story and its vilification in the time of patriarchy, what's your view on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's really interesting. You brought something up a little while ago, and I'd like to expand on that, because I think that is really at the soul and heart of Lucifer's symbolism and how much it's been misinterpreted. You brought up something that, you know, that some people have described Jesus as the light bearer, you know, and I've always said, I mean, the biggest example of Lucifer is Jesus. The biggest story of Lucifer is Jesus.
Yep.
That Jesus was and is a symbol of Luciferian light. And that's the irony. Isn't that something when you really think about that? What if that really is the thing that happened? How profaned did they do? I mean, what a disaster, right?
Yeah.
So here comes Jesus talking about shedding light, telling people, you know, all these things. And so then what they did was, I think the last thing he ever wanted was to be idolized, you know? And people, I always ask people, what Jesus do you love if they are Christian? Do you like the martyr or do you like the scapegoat?
Yeah,
because
interesting question.
Depending on which one that you say you love is going to be a very powerful reflection on your own inner world and your own assumptions, right? About what's right or wrong, what's sacred, what's profane. You know, I feel that he was a scapegoat.
Very much.
Then he showed up shedded light, right? He shed light, and was killed. So I feel like he was murdered. He didn't sacrifice himself. He was murdered because he was shedding too much light. So to me, we can talk about the mythologies of Lucifer, but to me, that is the most powerful example is of Jesus himself, and how they weaponized Jesus, turned him into an idol. And I feel like I feel like the entire Christian religion turned it upside down and inside out to fit their particular political and power motives, right? To grab power and so on.
Well, that happened when Constantine became emperor. And at the time, there were all these cults throughout, you know, that area of the world in the Roman Empire. You know, we had Attis, we had, there was Osiris, there was, oh gosh, they're all escaping me now. Anyway, there was like 6 or 7 of these different people who were all had similar Jesus stories, crucified. In fact, Lucifer's mythology as Prometheus is that because he brought light to the world, Zeus chained him to a rock where he was destroyed each day by some crow or something that ate his guts out, some, you know, horrible mythology. And then he would return to life the next day for it all to happen over again. So in a sense, Prometheus was crucified constantly for bringing light to humanity. Again, the Lucifer story correlates to Jesus and the crucifixion for bringing light to humanity. But at the time, when Constantine chose Christianity to be the religion, there were all these other cults with similar stories, people born of virgins and sacrificed in some way. And he just happened to choose Jesus and the Gnostic, oh, it wasn't really the Gnostic, the Christian story. Now, what would have happened if he'd chose Attis as the main religion that was going to be the religion of Rome that they were going to align with? We would all be, you know, living lives of, you know, where Attis and the cult of Attis had been influential upon our lives. But instead, the Roman Emperor Constantine chose Christianity, and here we are today. But it wouldn't have mattered what cult they chose, because what happened was they remythed everything to fit with their political agenda as a Roman culture. And hence we have the Roman Catholic Church, who left out, as you said, the Gnostic Gospels and all that beautiful wisdom that's available there, left them out of the canonized version of scripture and remythed everything in the Bible to be able to fit their agenda. And again, that happened once more. Sorry, I'm taking over. Forgive me.
No.
I'm passionate about this topic.
I love it. I love it. No, please keep on.
But one of the things that happened when the King James version of the Bible was rewritten by, it's believed, Sir Francis Bacon was the one who rewrote that. He was a 33rd degree Mason. Is there was all these Masonic and occult symbolism written into the Bible, and Christians these days think, you know, that it's all pure and light and what have you, but really they are carrying this this knowledge that of the, you know, the Masons that was introduced through that. So there's been many remythings of the Bible to suit certain agendas, and you've got to question if what you're believing and what you're reading is actually the truth, you know, and what we really want. Do we want to remain as slaves, or do we want to be free people, which is what Jesus was all about? And again, what the Lucifer story is all about, bringing gnosis, the light of knowledge. That's what the word gnosis means. Back to you, and I'll zip my mouth.
No, this is great, because I mean, it begs the question: do people really want freedom, or do they want comfort?
Yes.
Because, you know, this is a really powerful and I think very necessary question for people to ask themselves, especially people who are demanding, you know, that we want freedom. You know, and I say, even as a person, a woman of color in the United States of America, or Mexican American, you know, and if we're looking at the way things are rolling out in this country around social justice and the fight around race and so on, you know, even I tell people, and this is a very controversial thing that I say, you know, just because we are oppressed does not make us morally superior.
Absolutely. Okay? Or anyone.
It doesn't. And part of the challenge and understanding that is, say, where are we carrying the shame of religion? Where are we carrying and perpetuating and passing on the same unconscious, you know, way that we have been brainwashed by assuming what is right or wrong, good or evil, sacred and profane? Because the truth is, you know, there's a quote, it's like, all that is sacred has been profaned, right? And it really has. Everything that is right is wrong. Everything that is wrong is right. And we're living in this upside down right now, in great polarity to the original truth. And then bringing up the different cults and the Masons and so on. Well, what really happened is we had a cult of we have these men, right, who began to understand the secrets of nature. Yeah. And they started to create a system around organizing such primordial chaos, you know. And so what they did was they created systems that organized it. Not everybody was pondering upon the nature of reality like this, right? And so what happened was they created these systems, they stole her secrets, and they weaponized the secrets in the same way they weaponized this one man named Jesus, you know, to flip it and reverse it so they can be this like sorcerer or sorceress, you know, of the world, to create and cultivate power and a throne for which they were going to seat themselves, you know, to overlook and rule over people that don't know these things, that haven't thought of these things, or realized this in a way that they realized and then organized, you know. So to bring up the Masons, that was really a real powerful way that they've manifested, you know, all of that upside down world that we're living in now. I guess it takes 3,000 years for it to finally show up in the polarity. You know what I mean? The upside down from what it really is. And that's what I think is the returning. You brought that up too. I was so excited that you said, you said something and I don't remember what it was, but what I remember what I thought about when you said what I can't remember now was that, yes, it seems to take 2,500 years, 3,000 years for a cycle to return. And then Lucifer is exalted again, right? That's what you said.
I don't know that I said, but I totally agree. Yeah.
That's what's happening now, isn't it? And so we are in a new dark age right now. Nobody knows what original truth is. Everybody has their truths, but what is universal truth, right? From which all truths are born. All subjective truths are born from something that is objective. And what is that, right? And so I think that we're at that time now where we are in a bit of a dark age, you know. And so of course Lucifer is now going to be exalted as he shows up and shines a light into the darkness today.
It's very much what you're talking about, connected to Plato's great year, or the cycle of the yugas in the ancient Vedic, where certainly in the age of, say, Cancer, the goddess was glorified. And if you look at ancient Minoan culture and you see how there was Minoan culture, which was a very, very ancient representation of goddess culture, where women and their ability to give life and to birth new humans was you know, exalted and appreciated and treasured and celebrated. And Minoan culture was full of creativity and festivals and joy and equality between men and women. And it was a beautiful culture in this way, very indicative of the age of Cancer, where the goddess was above all. Right. And then as we've gone down in the cycle, you know, the knowledge is being lost, the wisdom of Gnosis, the wisdom of Lucifer is disappearing as we go down into what is known in a Vedic system as the Kali Yuga, the age of Aries, and then the age of Pisces. And that is when patriarchy rose up, and the honoring of the goddess, the honoring of the ability to give life and renew life was lost, as well as all ancient secrets and knowledge and wisdom. We've lost that, and we've gone back to a base state of violence and war and control and domination and manipulation for material means, material ends. And so the whole age of Aries and Pisces has been this Kali Yuga age, and now we're rising up out of it and starting to head back to the golden age, which will be the restoration of equality between men and women, and the honoring of the ability to give life and create life, which is the age of the goddess. So we're heading back that way, but it's going to take thousands of years, unfortunately. And it's really interesting that we're coming out of the age of Pisces now. Pisces is a beautiful energy. I'm a Pisces rising, and I will, you know, rah, rah, rah for Pisces all day long. But But the shadow side of Pisces is deception, and to have the wool pulled over your eyes and to be deceived. And what has happened throughout the last 2,000 years of the age of Pisces, the church has deceived. We've had the wool pulled over our eyes. The truth has been hidden from us. So, you know, we're coming out of that age too, and the enlightenment is about to become stronger. Sorry, I keep ranting, and this is your platform, my friend.
I think this is a powerful conversation, and I am very much enjoying it, and I'm learning from you as much as you are from me, and so this is really wonderful. I think it's, you know what, I think it's down low and dirty what they did, right? The church, because what they did was they manipulated people's minds and desire for to become something bigger than themselves, or just leadership, some kind of leadership. And they combined that with politics and money and power, right? The combination of the church and state. And like you said, in Rome, where it became an official religion, and they married each other. And the unholy marriage is what I say. It's the unholy marriage. That's what happened there, which has it's causing an effect now. This is why men and women can't, you know, are kind of at war as well. This is connected to that. But it's interesting how, because of that, they just needed a little bit of time to rape and pillage and take all the land and take all the resources. And now what's left over are a lot of people that don't have access to those things. And we have a few that do, right? And so it's almost like all those years were just to finally land at a time where only a few people have all the power and resources in the world. And Christianity, as we know it today, helped them to do that.
So could you explain for people how we are seeing the influence of patriarchy affecting our lives in a very real, tangible sense? Because a lot of us are still blind we're not awoken to how we have been coerced, we are in slavery. Could you sort of enlighten us as to, you know, some of the ways that and mechanisms that shows out in reality?
Right, sure. Well, a patriarchy is also known as male supremacy, right? So it's like, what does that mean? Well, it's like in the collective unconscious, we want to default to the masculine all the time, right? And, you know, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. To me, when I've observed the masculine principle, it's part of the will of mankind. You know, the masculine is the will, very Aries energy, right? Go out in the world. Even the genitalia sticks out, you know, it's outside, right? It's not inner, it's outer. Yep. So everything about the masculine on a spectrum is to go out in the world, die, fight for things, create, you know, build something. But what is sending them there is either their wisdom or lack of wisdom. And the wisdom, the inner, is the feminine, right? So what happened is patriarchy is something that I think initially needed to happen. It needed to happen, but then as I always say, the will then ran amok. It just ran amok, and it became self-worshiping. You know, it became this, and this is where this great narcissism and this malignant narcissism that is a consequence now lives so much in the masculine principle, and it is manifested, right, in that way in men, and therefore in the laws that men create, and the laws that we all have to live under, you know. And so it's all connected in that way. And it's come from a thought form that has been conjured after all these thousands of years to become so malignant and so power hungry. You know what I mean? That it's a consequence of hubris, of not checking in with the inner, you know, not going into the inner world of the feminine principle to remind ourselves that we are that too. So it just ran amok. And now we're living under the consequences of that kind of extreme narcissism as a result. And it has impacted, I mean, how many things has that impacted? You know, narcissism, everything from the top, the throne, to the household, you know, and the as above, so below. It's become a disease, hasn't it?
And your life, what if you want to share your story of how you've had to deal with patriarchal influences and how that's affected you, because you've got quite an interesting story to share.
It's intense. Well, I mean, oh my God, see, oh man, so many weird things happen. I'm just gonna, but the thing is, so I graduated college with a degree in journalism and English, and
You're so beautifully articulate, and your writing just blows me away. So I can see
thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, I'm glad that I took this route instead of the weirdo and not the editor-in-chief. I really don't have much respect for journalism today anymore. It just feels like it doesn't exist, right?
No.
But I have a degree in journalism and English, and so I was over at Mother Jones magazine. I don't know if you've heard of Mother Jones magazine in the United States. It's a national political magazine that leans very left out of San Francisco, California, and it's an award-winning magazine. And they were not paying their full-time interns. So I couldn't afford to do a full-time unpaid 9-to-5 job in San Francisco. So I started stripping.
Right.
So this is how I started to strip at night at the Larry Flint's Hustler Club.
Uh-huh. Does that have any connection to why you've named your devil Larry the devil?
You know what? Actually, no, but maybe unconsciously, yes. Maybe unconsciously, yes. But so that initiated me into an underworld of just incredible stories, incredible experience. I felt that my daytime was filled with pretending, and my nighttime, I was naked and unashamed. It was the true naked truth, physically naked, psychologically naked. People show you who they really are in that kind of environment. And so when it came time to choose whether I was going to go forward in my journalism career or not, I chose or not. And I decided to stay underground and take this journey because it was more honest, and I have a Sagittarius rising. So to me, truth is the most important thing.
Yes.
I want to chase truth. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that was more truth.
Yeah.
And so I stayed underground, and I stayed stripping for almost 20 years. And I was a dominatrix too. And so in those environments in different cities throughout this country, I observed with an acute awareness what was going on. And so basically my whole life was like field work, truly it was real field work. And I began to notice the sickness of the masculine and the sickness of the feminine as a result of that, as a byproduct of this having happened.
You have a very strong 8th house as well, and as do I. And so part of the impetus with a strong 8th house is to get to the core of things. You have this desire for the truth with Sagittarius, but you also want to get to the bottom to understand it completely. And we see this coming out in what you've experienced and your observations of humanity at its very naked level. And by naked, I mean in every sense of the word, naked and real, So very, very powerful journey that you've been on that's brought you to this point now.
Right. One of the things I wanted to add to that was the thing I noticed acutely. I remember having this thought. I started to feel like it was asking for too much now. Like the masculine was asking for too much. The bullying was increasing in the club. The men that came in, I felt like I was being bullied. Like that felt like it was getting worse. The stage fees that we have to pay were increasing.
Stage fees? What's the stage
fees? Dancers, strippers have to pay stage fees to work at the club. So we pay to go to work.
Excuse me?
Well,
it's mad.
I mean, some people would say that it's kind of like a hairstylist, has to pay or rent her seat, at the salon.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like that, but it's really worse.
Yeah.
It's really worse. And so I just felt like in every way, the desire to take my energy was increasing, and I wasn't getting anywhere near the return, and I felt like what happens in a strip club is really what's happening in society. It's just that it's in a concentrated form here.
In what way?
Well, when I started to pay more, they wanted us to pay more. That was eating into my currency, truly, right? Money, right? Currency, my money. They were allowing more girls to come to work, which creates more competition. Before they would not allow more than 45 women, but now they were letting anyone come in. So there's more competition. The men, as porn became more accessible on the internet, it made men desire more from us in the club because they had more access to what's behind the red door on the internet in a way they didn't before. So when they came into the club, they wanted us to do things we don't want to do, even for less money. So do more, allow us to exploit you more, and I'm going to pay you less. See how this is squeezing and squeezing, yeah, right? In all these different ways. So in my mind, as I was observing these truths playing out in the club, I asked myself, and I told myself, this is happening in society, but it's all out there hiding in plain sight. And here it's concentrated and in your face, right? And you feel it on the front lines of what's occurring out there. You know what I mean?
I do. How do you see it? How do you see it playing out in society at large? You know, I'm thinking of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, you know, and that all being exposed now as being, you know, sort of in the world and horrifying everybody, and the Me Too movement, that coming out and being, all these things are becoming more visible now. They've been underground for a long time. They've been in existence for a long time, but now they're being seen. But what are the perhaps more insidious ways that these patriarchal influences playing out are you observing?
You know, so I'm writing a book, and in that book, that it's a spectrum of Eve and Lilith, right? So it's sort of a way to help us consider ways toward decolonization, toward removing the false feminine.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Do you want to explain for those who don't know what colonization means? Because some people, particularly those who are in British colonies like Australia is, will see colonization as sort of British overtaking of other cultures, but you're talking about it in a different context. So could you just explain?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So colonization, it is a bit of that. It is a bit of the British taking over, and that's, we have to go back to the roots of that, right? But what helped them do that? The church. So I always say, you know, because when we come to the country, you know, because my background is indigenous too, like Comanche and Apache. So my people were annihilated, right? My people's lands were taken, and so on. And so that is a literal expression of colonization. But what I'm talking about now is to go into the deep undoing of the religion in our minds, to undo and ask ourselves, you know, wait a minute, why do I think that's evil? Why do I think that's good? Why do I think, you know, what's a demon versus not? I mean, have I ever wondered about these things, and how many of those things have been influencing my whole life decisions as a woman? Because for women, our colonization in our minds, which is rooted in shame. And so we are deeply afraid to be shamed, truly shamed, which is why we're cut into the Madonna whore. We're separated into the Madonna whore dichotomy, which is Eve and Lilith, right? Yeah. And so in those spaces, that's what I mean about colonization, is that the impact of that for women in a very insidious way that hides in plain sight, right, is our internalization of this Madonna whore dichotomy within our own hearts and our own souls and our own minds, and how that plays out in our decisions, how we pass that on to children if we have children, our daughters versus our sons. And then it continues to perpetuate this thing in a very insidious way, right? And it hides in plain sight. And so that is the most profound way that I see it happening with women in particular. Another way, because the feminine principle, we're talking about the archetypes, right, of the masculine and the feminine, which in the universal laws of nature is a polarity, feminine and masculine. But within the feminine principle in general, I see that as including not just women, but Black people, brown people, indigenous people, Aborigines, you know, in your neck of the woods, or Aboriginal people, poor people, people who still live off the land and subsistence, you know, throughout the world. So whatever that is, all on a spectrum, it's women, it's dark-skinned people, it's people still living off the land, it's indigenous people. All of these things are in correspondence to the feminine principle, aren't they? Because the feminine is darkness too.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And darkness is demonized. Nature is demonized. So all that on that feminine principle spectrum hides in plain sight, is demonized and scapegoated, exploited, and weaponized, right? So this is how I see the consequence of what has occurred with patriarchy, which is the church hiding in plain sight behind patriarchy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the consequence of all of that.
Yeah. In my story, like I notice, and where I live in rural provincial Australia, it's quite predominant that women will tend to, they believe they've got to sort of be in the background and support their man through, you know, lifting him up to succeed and what have you, and denying themselves the right to do that. And that can happen in many, many ways, you know, where, you know, you have children and therefore you give up your career, and, you know, you become the wife and mother, which is fine if that's your choice to be that. But for hundreds and thousands of years, we actually haven't had a choice. You know, that's been our role. That's it. You're not allowed to get educated. You're not allowed to have work. It's only sort of been in recent times, the last 100 years or so, that women have been able to vote and have a say. So there's been all these mechanisms of keeping women small so that men can take the podium, so to speak. And that's been part of my awakening process. I've chosen to remove the story that I shared in this interview with Chriselda simply because I don't want to cause offense to any person, and I want to be respectful. So I've removed the story that I shared, but instead I'd like to share another example of how patriarchy and the male dominance has influenced the culture where I live, and I'm sure it's the same all over the world. My mother's story is a very interesting one. She was one of 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and grew up in rural Australia on a farm. And when it came time for my grandparents to retire, they left the farm, multi-million-dollar farm, full of prosperity, to their son, because he was born with the right genitalia. Now, the 3 girls in the family, they were left the house that my grandparents had retired to. Upon my grandparents' passing, my 2 aunties and my mother were left the local house in the nearby town, and it was worth roughly about $120,000, which they had to split between the 3 girls. Now, this is not an unusual story of inequality between genders in rural Australia. And it's not just one from, you know, the 50s, or, you know, that's when my mother was born, in the 50s. So this occurred in the 90s and early 2000s when this happened. It's not just something from past generations. I'm in my mid-40s. I have a girlfriend, same age as me, who has experienced this phenomenon just in the last 5 years, where her brother was left the multi-million-dollar family farm and she was left nothing, absolutely nothing. And so this inequality that women have had to just take on board. Okay, that's just the way it is, because I was born with the wrong genitalia, and it does not matter if I wanted to be the one to take over the family farm and manage the family farm as a female manager of the farm. That does not matter, because I was not born with the right genitalia. So that's just an example of how insidious, I get the words right, this epidemic of patriarchy has been. And people in rural Australia have just gone with this for years. That's just the way it is. The men get the farm and the women don't get anything. They get a husband, you know, and that's the end of the story, you know. So just to illustrate the injustice, so people can get an idea of how this is playing out practically in our everyday realities all around us all the time. That's just an illustration from my own experience that I observe happening everywhere in rural Australia, and I know it's similar all around the world. It's unfortunate, but many women have actually perpetuated this situation in the world by simply accepting that this is just the way it is. And even my grandmother, she encouraged that my uncle should get the family farm, and I love my uncle very dearly, but you know, she encouraged that should be the case, my grandmother. So again, we have an example of the perpetuation of the inequality also coming from women who are not backing the equality and the movement for equality that's so needed. And I actually experienced this in my life, where I would put other people before myself. Many times this occurred in many relationships, because I thought that's just what women did, and I'm going to share a little bit about that with you now. It was my choice to take that role, because that's what I thought women did. You know, they sacrifice themselves, they martyr themselves so that others can rise up. And it was an awakening process in my 30s to realize, you know, that doesn't have to be the case. And in fact, that's patriarchy dominating the mindset. So
right.
that's been my experience of it. Yeah.
A little bit of a devil's advocate comment to make about patriarchy.
Yes.
And it's pretty devil's advocate because people have gotten upset when I've asked this or brought this up. But isn't it interesting how in some ways, patriarchy has forced us women to wake up. Because when you're finally playing that role, and then you had an awakening where you're like, wait a minute, I'm really just kind of not, I'm realizing what's going on all of a sudden. And it's like Lilith looking at Adam saying, oh, wait, you know what? I'm not here for you. I'm here with you.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
right?
The difference.
Like,
that's
oh,
the difference.
shit.
It's subtle, but it's profound. Yes.
It's a profound dial. I just turn the dial a little bit and all of a sudden everything's just a whole new world, when you do that. But it took that experience to awaken that sort of desire to self-actualize as well, right? And so in a lot of ways, it's really interesting how this is patriarchy is running out, and in its dying, there's a liberation occurring at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Which is I think with the Luciferian returning, women, the feminine principle coming out from hiding, and all at the same time. This is the correspondence there with Lucifer too. Yeah. With the feminine principle.
Yep, absolutely. I'm interested in your perspective on how patriarchy has impacted men as well, because I'm a mother of 2 boys who I love dearly, and I want them to be empowered in their masculine self. And it's interesting talking to you about masculine, feminine energies. A lot of people I'm speaking to, particularly of the younger generations these days, they're very interested in sort of creating a balance between their masculine and feminine within them, which I find really exciting that they're interested in that. I know I recently had, not recently, it was a couple of years ago, I had a face reading. And just as an aside, Robin, my past life regressionist, she does face readings for people, and she has the software to sort of take the right-hand side of your face and duplicate it so it becomes a full face. So you can look at your the right and the left, masculine, feminine. You can look at your masculine side and your feminine side. And when I looked at my feminine face, I forget if it's the right or the left.
It's probably the left.
The left.
Maybe.
So she took the left-hand side of my face and sort of mirror imaged it. And that was like a little girl, like, oh, take care of me. And, that kind of look was in my face. But the masculine side, the duplication of the right side, was exhausted. And it was like this masculine energy, I'm carrying the load. And there's a total imbalance here between the masculine and feminine. Sorry, I've digressed. But I think part of our journey is learning to embrace the two. And I'm really curious about how men can do that as a mother of boys, and how I can help them to sort of see the truth about how patriarchy has corrupted men as well. Do you
Yeah. I think I wrote this to you in an email. And this is a really whole nother difficult road for men, because men are rewarded for becoming a jerk. You know what I mean? They really are rewarded. This is what I mean about the masculine being sick.
Yeah.
Right. The entitlement there is different. Not that women don't have entitlements. That's a whole nother, but they're not the same.
Yeah.
Men get rewarded for continuing this behavior. You know what I mean? And they are damned if they start to take responsibility and go inward, because that's the feminine, because the feminine's damned, right?
Yeah.
So they are rewarded. So the difficult thing here is the question is maybe the question is, how can I help my sons see that the harder path, it's going to be harder, is going to be, sort of a path towards saving your own soul, or not selling out your whole
not selling
soul.
out. Yeah.
Right. Not selling your soul. And can you, do you have the willpower? Do you have the integrity enough to look at all of that seduction and say no to it? So that is really where it's at for boys. You know what I mean? It's there
I
because
read
the world wants them. The world is going to throw it all at them. It's going to throw all kinds of women at them. It's going to throw all kinds of power and money and affirmations of the ego, and which is going to then create what? A man who will never know himself.
Yes, and that's the detriment, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely. And I can see it affecting my teenage boys. You know, it's very, it's very strong.
How can you possibly get a hold of that seduction? Like, it's everywhere, you know. And what I mean by seduction is I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I'm talking about, the seduction of power.
Yes.
Money and status. And
yeah, I read an article recently because there's been a lot on this kind of topic in the media lately because of, I think it was a girl in England who was abducted on her way home from somewhere. I don't know the ins and outs of the story, but there's been a lot of discussion about sort of rape culture, if you like, and you know, a lot of people have been saying, oh, she should wear. There was one report on the news in Britain that she should wear sort of running shoes when you're walking home from the station or from work, just in case you're attacked. I mean, what a load of bullshit. She just shouldn't be attacked in the first place, you know? And so there's been this discussion about men, you know, if you don't speak up against this kind of culture, you're equally as culpable as the people perpetrating the act, which I agree about. But this article I was reading was saying men are actually scared of other men. You know, they're afraid to speak up because of the bullying they will receive and the power and dominance and influence. So, you know, they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't, in many senses as well. So we really need men who are brave enough to step into their masculine power and honor the feminine truly and fully, and to speak up about their actions in doing so as well. That's my perspective on that.
right.
Yeah. Do you see any ways ways forward that we can break this influence of patriarchy? Like, do you see change happening?
I see change happening. I think a lot of it is, it's hard to really say if it's a lot of it, how much of it is, you know, really. In some ways, I see the same emperor changing clothes. You know what I mean?
No, what do you mean by the emperor changing clothes?
So we're talking about the dying, God is dying, you know what I mean? On that sort of like the God we know and the God of the desert, the Abrahamic God that, or, you know, Christianity in particular, it was born out of Judaism and all of that. That God is dying, right? So we know that with death has to, nature abhors a vacuum and it has to replace it with something else, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What is being replaced is the question. Is it, hi, welcome, you know, meet your new boss is the old boss. It's just the optics are different, you know, which is why you see a lot of women who, just because they're elected to different positions, doesn't necessarily mean that they have the same values that you and I might have. You know, they might carry the torch of the value of patriarchy, but they're women, right? So this is why this kind of deep inner work and excavation is so profoundly important, because that's the root of it. If we don't pluck the root of it, it's going to grow over here and over here, but it may look different because it's in a different pasture now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really the hard work of the inner unplucking, you know, the inner journey of losing your religion, you know, losing that, you know, there's no easy way. There's no shortcut. And this is what I tell people all the time. I say, are you ready and willing to do your own inner work? Because we can't change them. All you can do is alchemize within yourself.
Yes.
That's it. I mean, that's it. We're not looking to be authoritarian over people.
No.
We have to, this is the work here. I mean, it may sound not sexy, right? But it's the truth. It's the only way.
Yeah. And is this the kind of work that you do one-on-one with people, women in particular? Yeah.
Women in particular, right.
Which I find that beautiful, what you're doing. It's interesting. I've had so many people coming across my path, especially in the last 2 months, actually, who are saying they're coming out of brainwashing. They're coming, particularly by religion and the church, and they're wounded people. You know, they're hurting from it. And I remember when I broke away from it, it was a really hard thing to do because that was my world. You know, I was raised in a church of 200 people. And that was, I went to school, a school that was associated with that church. And they were beautiful people. They're lovely people. There's no denying that. But there was this institutionalization of the way I thought through being involved in that group. And to break away from it was a very courageous thing to do because it was essentially saying no to everything I'd ever been taught. And I think now it would have been so good to have had like a counseling program for people coming out of that brainwashing. I mean, we have a 12-step program for alcoholics coming out of alcoholism and alcohol addiction. And we have, you know, this, that, and the other for people who are coming out of wounding situations. I think we need something, and you're doing this. This is what I love about your work. You're doing this. You're providing the support, the guidance. You've started something recently called the Confessional. Do you want to share about what that actually is?
Well, this is the Crimson Confessional.
Yeah.
You know, it's a, you know, me, I'm very theatrical. I like theater and, you know, make things fun. So it's like, you know, I'll help you walk into your holy hell. We'll have fun.
I love it. I love it. Is your circus hat? Are you the ringleader?
It's like I forgot what this is called. I don't remember. Steampunk, I think.
Yes, I love steampunk.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Very cool.
So yes, that's the thing is that when I say decolonization, and of the mind, I mean losing your religion in particular, you know. And what I do is I use the ancient system of the Hermetic principles to do that. And so what I do is we go through the Hermetic principles and I demonstrate exactly how each law of nature was moralized by the church. How the shroud of false morality wrapped itself around this profound and pure truth and then turned it profane to use it and weaponize it to then enslave humanity, right?
Yeah.
So I go through each principle and demonstrate how this has happened. And then I ask them to go out in the world and observe this for themselves. I always tell people, don't take my word for it. Always question me, question all authority, to be honest with you. And just go see for yourself, because I want you to experience the knowledge, not just leave it in your head and like something you study in a book or something. I want you to experience it. And then I give them homework about like documentaries to watch, different things to read to help reinforce this, to show this is occurring in the world. Yeah. So that's what I do.
So you're really supporting people in their awakening and helping them to think for themselves. I find that super empowering. I wish I'd have known you back in, 2010 when I was waking up.
You know, the thing is that kind of awakening from that religious abuse, it's the same as narcissistic abuse.
Yes.
And it's just so hard to point to somebody who was a narcissist who abused you. It was a whole institution. So it becomes like so ambiguous and abstract, and like the boogeyman, you can't put a face to it. And it's just a shock.
Yeah.
To all of a sudden realize what has been happening.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. I mean, really what you're doing is helping liberate people who want to come out of the slavery that we've been in.
Right. And I tell people, I said, this is not, we're going to have fun because I want to have fun.
Yeah.
I want to have fun, but I need to know that you're ready, because once you can't unsee this, you can't unknow this. And it's, you have to be ready to make action in your life. Not just let it sit in your head, because then it'll haunt you. Once you see these truths, you can't unsee them. So it's kind of like the red pill, right? Oh, the red pill in the Matrix, where
okay.
It's sort of like that. I'm not promising you happiness, right?
Yeah.
You do with these truths what you will do with these truths, if you say this is what you want.
So you're really empowering people along the way, which I love. I think about if the Book of Enoch, and it's an interesting account by Enoch, who, if you take all sort of I was going to say he was one of the patriarchs, so of the Hebrew culture. So around that time of when we were transitioning out of goddess culture into patriarchal culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was writing about in the Book of Enoch was the watchers or the angels or the wisdom givers coming down to earth and giving knowledge to women, you know, with their metalwork, with use of herbs, with understanding of the stars and astrology. And this knowledge was given to women. And when you strip back a lot of the periphery of the Book of Enoch, what is really visible is the jealousy that was there of this wisdom that had been given to women, you know, this knowledge that had been given to women. I mean, Enoch, when I read it, I'm like, this dude is just jealous and he wants to malign what's been given through these wisdom givers to women, so that the patriarchy who missed out, we didn't get told about, you know, this, that, and the other, they get their knickers in a knot about it. And so I love what you're doing in that it is allowing people to go back into that wisdom and knowledge that we had so many years ago. You mentioned using the Hermetic principles, and I think they are key foundations to this very ancient knowledge that was given to women, and that men can use too. It's not exclusively for women, you know, but I think that, yeah, the use of the Hermetic principles and the empowerment of women is helping them tap back into the ancient gifts that were given to us, the knowledge that was given to us, talked about in the Book of Enoch. That's just my perspective on that.
You know that I always talk about, now I may say a bad word right now. Is that okay?
That's okay.
I always say that it's cunt envy.
That's exactly right. That's what it was, you know.
Yeah, it is. It's everything is rooted in cunt envy, because if we know, and I say the word cunt, but you know, if we understand the etymology of that word, then we understand that that also is an example of how the feminine has been shamed and demonized and weaponized, because the etymology of that word means a deep inner knowing.
Yeah.
And so how did something so sacred become so profaned, right? Hello.
Yeah, they love to do that, don't they? To make the sacred vilified. Again, the story of Lucifer. Now, you mentioned to me in before we went to record this, you mentioned about the sacred marriage between Lucifer and Lilith, which is something I know nothing about. Did you want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, it's nothing that I've never read about it anywhere. I came to see this myself in my own walk. I think I've seen a couple of people starting to talk about this here and there, like in real sort of deep pockets. It's not something that I've seen has come out or coming out yet out into the light of day necessarily. Because when I think about clearly Lucifer, right? He's shining a light into the darkness. What is the darkness? It is the forgetfulness, right? It's the amnesia.
Yes. Yes.
It's to shine a light so we can remember, right? Isn't an epiphany feels like we just remembered something, right? When we have an epiphany. And so that's the purpose of the Luciferian light, is to help us walk and be baptized by our own holy hell. You know, how are we going to enter our own hell? With what light can we look around, you know? And it's the Luciferian light. And what do we find when we go down into our hell? We find our true nature, which is Lilith. Lilith is our true nature. To me, Lilith is nature that doesn't have an agenda. It just is what it is. It is the natural law, and the universal principles are like her soul. So Lilith is like nature, and the universal principles are like a way to get to know her. It's like her soul. So if we marry, all of a sudden he finds his bride, you know, by witnessing her. He sees her and witnesses her in her absolute truth, right? And she's in there hiding because she's been submerged because of colonization, because of false morality, right? All these things. And he discovers her. And then there they are, you know, the beloved. They find each other. And that to me is the true Tantra. And I mentioned that to you too, because that's another thing that's been profaned, you know, is this idea of Tantra, where people focus so much on the sex part of it and the orgasm part of it, because we've been so suppressed sexually, we still don't understand it, that it still misses the mark. Really what that is, true Tantra is finding the inner balance of the masculine and feminine and the self, right? And if everyone did that, the divine marriage of Lilith and Lucifer, that if everyone did that, suddenly the universe is in balance, right? Humanity is in balance. And that's what that ultimately is balance, isn't it? Yes. Divine balance, divine marriage. And that's what I mean about the marriage of Lilith and Lucifer.
The conjoining of the masculine and feminine in equality, which
right.
Inequality, not inequality, inequality, which I love.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. I'm really captivated by the whole Lilith story, actually, because I know in the ancient Hebrew, she was referred to as, Lilith was referred to as the star Algol. So they assert, because everything in the Bible is actually, you know, astrotheology, a lot of it. And Lilith, it was Algol. Now, people who know about Algol know that she's considered to be a very difficult star. She's actually a wealth star, but she's a very difficult star in the head of Medusa. And Medusa is, you know, if you're familiar with constellational art, Medusa's not this gargoyle up in the sky. It's the head of Medusa being held onto by Perseus, who chopped her head off. Right. If you know the mythology. So Algol sits in the head of Medusa, and that was Algol, this star, was what the Hebrews referred to as Lilith. And to me, I find that really heartbreaking, because I detest the story of Medusa, quite honestly. Yeah. And I think it's time we actually remythed that story, because she was severely maligned and raped, and then created as the victim, even though, created as the punished one, even though she was the victim in that particular mythology. So yeah, really, really interesting that there was a correlation to Medusa with the Lilith star there.
And that's interesting too, because of the Eve and Lilith, you know, that my book is based on, exploring this spectrum between Eve and Lilith, and the spectrum between the Madonna whore. And if we look at Athena, the story of Athena and Medusa, right? And Athena is really the one who threw her under the bus. She's an example in that frame of an Eve, you know, and where Medusa is like a Lilith, because she wanted to maintain her appearance with the patriarchy, right, and her power role. And so she threw an innocent woman under the bus to maintain her power. So that is another example of how women can still take on the next mantle, right, of malignant, you know.
That's something I observe in culture as well, is that we might be trying to collectively rise up and awaken the divine feminine, but women can be just as obstructionist to the awakening of the divine feminine as men. And I'm like, what's going on here? And what you've just recognized, and for those who don't know the story of Medusa, Athena, the goddess, Medusa was a maiden in service, like she was a priestess in the service of Athena, who was raped by Neptune, Poseidon, and Medusa went to Athena for support and for help, because she had been raped by this god. And what did Athena do? Turned her into a gargoyle with snakes for hair, so that no man would look at her, and she would turn men to stone if they did. So, you know, she was punished for being raped, which was wrong. And here again, we see this in society of the women actually, like you said, throwing other women under the bus and not helping the divine feminine to rise up. So, you know, I find that really concerning, and I see that a lot in society, actually, condemning women who come into their own power, who embrace their feminine energy. You know, it's really, like, women attacking women is a horrible, horrible thing.
Right. It's an interesting phenomenon. And I explore that in my book. And that's why it's like everything's on a spectrum, as you know. And for women, everything's on a spectrum between Eve and Lilith. Their experiences, you know, between Athena and Medusa, between the Madonna whore, you know, we have been weaponized. We're the first conquer and divide, you know, that patriarchy inflicted on the planet was through women. Yeah. So we're the first conquer and divide. We're the first colonized, you know, and we're the first enslaved on the planet. And then it's just been moving into the rest of the feminine principle ever since, you know what I mean? This is what has been occurring. Yeah. And they needed us to fight each other so that they can you know, on their way to self-actualization on the throne, you know, to power and status. And so this, and it worked, didn't it?
Yeah.
It worked.
It's definitely a strategic move to cause infighting, you know, amongst the enemy, isn't it? So, you know, that's precisely what's happened, you know. And yeah, I mean, you only have to look back into the ages when women were being burned at the stake for gathering herbs to make medicines or what have you, and you'd have other women dobbing them in to the authorities for that sort of thing to happen. So that was happening then. We're seeing it now as well, sort of. People sort of pointing the finger and wagging the finger if we try to embrace our empowerment. So very, very interesting. I can't wait for your book, actually. You know, like, hurry up and publish it. I'll be first in line for a copy.
Well, I'm writing it in here, and so that I'm just in my red room, my closet, you know, just have quiet. And I have a little altar over here, and it's a perfect little place to do it. It really is a labor. It feels like labor, you know. I've never given birth, so let me just say that. But it does. This is my creation, you know. After 48 years of manifesting and synthesizing all of what I've seen through my experience into this, and I know that it'll be controversial. I mean, you know me well enough at this point to know I can be a little controversial.
Nothing wrong with that. Shake things up.
You're right. I mean, it's like, I'm shining a light inside of these spaces, and that's all I can do. You know, this in the Gospel of Thomas, he says, if you bring forth what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you will destroy you.
Wow.
So, right.
Wow, that's so rich and profound. I haven't read the Gospel of Thomas. Now I think I need to.
Right. Yeah. I think that you'd really enjoy the Gnostic Gospels, and specifically the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, where you can see why the guys did not want to canonize that one, you know.
Why was that? What was the message in that was perhaps so distasteful to the patriarchy?
Because it's clear that, you know, she was Jesus's favorite disciple. Right. And that she understood him in ways that the men could not understand him. And he knew that. And so what happened? They were jealous. Peter was the most jealous, which makes complete sense, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
He was the most jealous.
Yeah. You know? Son of thunder. Yeah. You know? Oh, it's so interesting. You know, one of the books I've recently read is called The Chalice and the Blade, which I highly recommend, by the way. It's an academic look at the rise of the patriarchy and how religion has played a part in that. And what the author describes as Jesus' mission was to bring back the goddess culture, which I talked about earlier with the Minoan sort of things, and to bring that back into being. And of course, that did not go down well with the authorities, who wanted to maintain dominance and power and control. And so from that, that's where your group, if you like, the Gnostic believers, created, you know, their were founded. And at the same time, you had your more mainstream Christians that came out of the work of the masculine disciples of Jesus and then evolved into the Catholic Church. So definitely Gnosticism is something I want to look more into, because I find from what I have read and understand, there's so much more of a richness and an authenticity and a truth. Again, Lucifer, the light bearer, the giver of knowledge, the truth, illuminating the truth within us, you know, and his association with that. I want to, discover more about what the truth was with Jesus and his message and his overall mission.
Right. Well, you know, I'm sharing a lot of the research I'm doing right now on an app called Clubhouse. I know we're in different places, and so this is live, but anyway, I'm reading right now from a book by Elaine Pagels, who I think that you would love, and all your viewers and audience who are into this conversation and would like to know more. I would totally dig into Elaine Pagels, who wrote The Origin of Satan. And she also wrote about the Gnostic Gospels. She's just a profound scholar, and I really love her work. And she's done a lot of this. She's like the only women who is out there doing this work too. So I would look her up. And I think that
well,
you will enjoy her. And I think, like I said, any of your viewers who are intrigued by this conversation and are interested in this path, she definitely would be somebody to look up.
awesome. Now, if people want to work with you and to get that support, if they're going through their own awakening process, to help sort of, use those Hermetic principles to awaken, and what you do is very Luciferian, you shine the light of knowledge into people's lives, get them to search deep, dig deep, understand themselves more in that process, which is such a powerful work that you're doing. If they want to work with you, where do people go to sort of connect with you and to follow your work, or to have a session with you? Where can we do that?
You can go to my website. It's ChriseldaPacheco.com. And I know that it's like, how do you spell that? But I know you'll have it spelled out somewhere.
Yeah, I'll pop it in the comments section. The description section below.
By the way, I just have to say, you know what? I found out the meaning of my whole name. Chriselda, it means old warrior. It's an old Germanic name, and it means old warrior. Marie, my middle name, means oh shit, what is it? I forgot what it is. Something like rebellious, bitter child, or chosen. Yeah, rebellious, bitter, chosen child. That's what it was. And wow. Pacheco is rooted in the Franks, which fought against the Roman Empire, and it means free man, enemy of the empire. So my name is Gray warrior, bitter, rebellious, wished for child, free man, enemy of the empire.
How perfect!
I'm living my
life. There's so much power in a name. I think, even if it's unconsciously given by our parents. That's
right. No, totally. So, ChriseldaPacheco.com, or you can find me on Instagram or my YouTube, which I'll give you the links. So
yeah, awesome. Well, look, this has been such a joy to explore this. I'm sorry if I've talked too much. I get excited about this topic, which is why I love the work that you're doing. I think people, like I said before, when I was awakening, to have somebody like you to hold space for me, to guide me, to help me do the inner work would have been such a blessing and such a gift. And so... yeah, I'm just in awe of what you're doing. I think it's really, really needed, especially on this day when Venus is conjunct with the sun, talking women's issues, dealing with the divine feminine and awakening that. It's a very empowered thing that you're doing. And I hope lots of people jump on your Facebook pages and what have you and connect with you there. And I look forward to your book coming out as well. So get working, get on it.
Yeah, I will. I'll keep on laboring. It's definitely a labor of love. And so just wanted to say a message to everybody. If you're feeling this kind of pressure or a lot of shame, and you really want to exit the church and want to understand these things more deeply, you're not alone, right? There's a lot of awakening occurring now. It's your true nature that's desiring so much to express itself. It's been trapped, and you have a right. This is your divine right to live here on the planet Earth as you, not some pretending version of yourself, right? So we all have the right, if we're here, to liberate ourselves, for sure.
Awesome. I might, if it's okay, I might just add that it's not just only about coming out of the church and the sort of the psychological work that involves, but it's just breaking away from stereotypes and the brainwashed influence of what the role of a woman actually is in the world, and becoming aware and liberated with that too. So, yeah.
Naked and unashamed. Liberate yourself from shame. That is the root of all of this crap for women. So that's it.
Love it.
Right.
Well, thank you, Chriselda. This has been a joy. Maybe we'll get together and do something like this again sometime when we're transitioning from the evening star to the morning star. We can have session number 2.
I can't wait for that. I really had a great time today, Kesenya. You're awesome.
Thank you. Okay. Love to everyone. We'll catch you next time.